What if there was a podcast that did it all? Sports, politics, world events. Well, that's what we've got. You're listening to C&C Talks.
Hello, I'm Colin.
And I'm Charlie.
And welcome to episode 24 of the C&C Talks podcast.
Just a reminder, as we do every week, we release every Tuesday, and we talk about politics, world events, and sports. It is currently Monday, November 21st, 2022, at about 5 p.m. Pacific Time.
And coming up on this episode, all the latest on Twitter, the midterms, Russia-Ukraine, the MLB offseason, the NFL, college football, the World Cup, and a whole lot more. Let's get right into it, Charlie.
So, as you may have seen, Twitter is collapsing on itself. Hundreds of employees have quit due to Musk's hardcore plan for Twitter 2.0, and this will likely cause the platform to fully collapse within the coming weeks. And this will not be helped at all by the fact that Donald Trump is being let back onto the platform as a result of a poll that Elon Musk did. Can we get some more on why Trump was banned in the first place?
Yeah, so Trump was banned right after January 6th because he had incited the insurrection, partly using Twitter, and then refused to condemn the attacks on Twitter, and in fact, in some ways, encouraged it to continue, and Twitter felt like he was continuing to incite violence. And the way that Musk decided to try to let him back on was, let's be honest, very unprofessional. Trump, however, he says that he will not use Twitter and is instead going to stick to Truth Social. And I think that part of that is because if he leaves Truth Social, which he owns, then that will basically completely collapse the platform. And that will lose him a lot of money. Let's move on now to the midterms, where races are still coming in about 2 weeks later, but we have a big result, which the Republicans have retaken the House, according to all major projections. And Charlie, what have they said that they're going to do with their new power in the House of Representatives?
Well, the Republicans have already announced dozens of planned investigations, most of which are regarding Hunter Biden, and they have not mentioned inflation or the border since the election. And I think one of the biggest standing questions coming out of the midterms is now who will be the Speaker of the House. Kevin McCarthy has the support of most of the Republican caucus, but he can only lose about 5 Republican votes, and about a dozen have planned to vote against him. The Republicans also plan to ban Ilhan Omar, Eric Swalwell, and Adam Schiff from serving on committees. This is payback for Democrats removing Marjorie Taylor Greene from committees when they were in charge of the House. Greene, of course, has spread conspiracy theories and threatened her colleagues, while Omar, Swalwell, and Schiff have done nothing wrong.
Yeah, and I think, Charlie, it really looks to me like, right, the new Republican majority, they just seem to be more interested in getting what I guess you could call revenge on their opponents and a bunch of grandstanding than actually governing, which is, of course, what the American people elected them to do, right? America has a lot of problems. It would be really nice if they could work to try and solve the problems. Again, they mostly ran on inflation. They have yet to put forward a plan to solve inflation.
Yes, that is true. And in other more local, well, not local to us, but more localized in terms of nationwide, Karen Bass has won the Los Angeles mayoral race. Now, the 4 biggest cities in the U.S. will now all have black mayors. In another House news, Nancy Pelosi has retired from House leadership, and likely successor as House Democratic leader will be Hakeem Jeffries.
Yep.
So, can we get a little bit more about Pelosi's career?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the best politicians of all time. 20 years in Democratic leadership, 8 years as Speaker of the House. She was the first female speaker, and pretty clearly just the most effective speaker of all time. When she wanted something passed in the majority, she would find the votes to get it passed. She is just basically the best to ever do it, and especially if we look at who some of the new speakers could be in this next Congress, I don't see anybody matching what she was able to accomplish in her 8 years as Speaker of the House. Meanwhile, and this is something that we're not going to touch on for too long, but Trump has announced that he is running for president again, which will is likely a move to avoid an indictment, but it sets up a potential primary battle with Ron DeSantis. Speaking of a Trump indictment, there were signs this week that we may be getting closer to one, Charlie.
Yes. Merrick Garland has appointed a special counsel to oversee the Trump investigation to make the investigation seem apolitical. Specifically investigating Trump's role in January 6th and the classified documents at Mar-a-Lago. Jack Smith will serve as that special counsel, and Jack is the former chief prosecutor to The Hague.
Yeah, and so that's a big deal. You can tell that they are clearly very serious about this investigation. Meanwhile, the Senate has passed a bill to codify gay marriage and interracial marriage. It's really just a precaution in case those two rights get overturned by the Supreme Court, as is possible given some of their previous decisions. But Charlie, over 30 Republicans voted against the bill.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't really think that's a surprise to a lot of people. Of course, a lot of the large challenge to gay marriage is coming from a lot of religious organizations, and generally those people tend to be on the right side of the political spectrum.
Correct. Speaking of LGBTQ rights, there was another tragedy. There was a mass shooting at a Colorado gay nightclub, which left 5 people dead. Just a hate crime against the LGBTQ community, done apparently by the grandson of a far-right Republican state, a legislator in California. And Charlie, as I look at this, this seems to be directly incited by the far right in this country based on some of the previous things that they've said about LGBTQ people, how they're groomers and everything. And right, it's leading to tragedies like this.
Yeah. It's just terrible.
And another tragedy in Poland, where some anti-air missiles fired by Ukrainian meant to shoot down Russian missiles accidentally landed in Poland and killed 2 civilians. But Charlie, given that they were meant to shoot down Russian missiles, it feels a lot like it was Russia's fault. And this could potentially signal some sort of escalation given that Poland's a NATO country.
Yes. The big concern for almost everyone in the world at this point is that Poland could choose to enact Article 5, which states that an attack on one is an attack on all, which essentially says if a country or nation is attacked, then all NATO members will declare war on the attacking nation. It's unlikely that Poland does choose this path, but if they are to do so, this would likely cause World War III.
Yeah. Some kind of cool news. The world population this week has hit 8 billion. Here in some more local news here in the U.S., Thanksgiving is this Thursday, and I thought it'd be a good time, Charlie, to reflect on, given the origins of the holiday, is it even a holiday that's worth celebrating?
Yeah, I think definitely that is a debate to be had. Of course, given what its origins are. I do think it is an interesting fact that it was a holiday in the first place, and also the fact how commercialized it's become. But obviously, as have most holidays in our current society.
And yeah, I kind of feel like I celebrate Thanksgiving, but I don't celebrate Thanksgiving to celebrate how it was originally intended as a holiday, right? I celebrate it as just like a chance to get together with family and eat food, really. But
so I think is it maybe possible that we have to start maybe redefining what the holiday is about then?
I very much think that is, yeah, that's kind of the point that I was trying to get at. All right, before we move on to the second half of our show, we've got some questions. This one comes from our website, cctalks.net. It says, here's a question to consider if Trump announces that he's running. What worries you most about a possible second Trump presidency? Charlie, I'll let you go first.
Well, I think, as with every presidential candidate, we have to look at what their agenda could be. And with Trump, it really is a concern, I would say, of really, if he does become president again, and if he does win, I think we really have to start questioning are we going to continue to have a democracy? Because after 2020, of course, with all those election challenges, he could just decide if he wants to, if the Republicans control the entirety of the U.S. government, could they just scrap a bunch of election integrity things and really begin their takeover of the government, which is a huge concern.
Yeah, so I agree with you, and I feel like there's so many things that are be concerning, especially with foreign policy, especially as regards to Russia and Ukraine. But yeah, democracy here in the U.S. feels like the biggest one. I will point out, though, that I find it very unlikely that Trump is able to win another term in the presidency. First, because he might be indicted, but second, because as we've seen them for the past week or last few weeks since the midterms, it's not clear to me that he has the support of the right anymore to get through a primary, because he's been costing that party big time in elections, and I think that they feel like they would be better off with a different leader of that party. So if you want to ask us a question, there's 3 places that you can do so. You can ask us on our website, cctalks.net, or you can leave us a voicemail at 360-389-2630. Or you can tweet at us at C&C Talks Podcast. The announcement, which is that next Monday, C&C Talks 5 premieres. It's 5 minutes, 3 to 7 times a week, 7 a.m. exclusively on YouTube, a recap of the prior day. This is the C&C Talks Podcast. Thank you so much for listening, everybody. Let's move on to sports.
Yeah. So let me just get over to it. Okay. So first we'll start out in the MLB with probably the biggest award, and that being the MVP award. Aaron Judge has won it for the AL, and Paul Goldschmidt wins it in the NL. Of course, Aaron Judge, who hit 60+ home runs, of course he very much deserves it. And Paul Goldschmidt coming out of the NL, of course, another very deserving candidate. As for the Cy Young, Justin Verlander, you can't really. There isn't really any negative. He did great. He went to World Series with his team. He won it. And then I'm going to give it over to Colin for the rest of the list.
Sandy Alcantara won the NL Cy Young Award for Rookie of the Year, Julio Rodriguez in the American League, and Michael Harris II in the National League. And for Manager of the Year, Terry Francona in the American League, and Buck Showalter in the National League. So, Charlie, let's get your thoughts on some of these awards. Did the baseball writers get it right?
Just from my personal opinion, I think they're pretty accurate. I feel like for the AL manager, I feel like either Scott Service or Dusty Baker would have been a better choice, but that's up to the writers, not up to me.
From the Orioles.
Yeah, that's true as well.
I definitely agree with that. I think that they mostly got it right. I still disagree with AL MVP. It's close. I think Ohtani's more deserving though than Judge. Let's not forget, Judge in most seasons, clearly deserving, should be just a runaway favorite. But with Ohtani, I genuinely think that we saw the greatest season in baseball history this year. And I think that he was the most deserving of that award. And it was close, don't get me wrong, very close. But to me, it was Ohtani.
But I think the reasoning behind Judge winning is you can't. Which one looks better, if you take your team to the ALCS or if you're a bottom-feeding team in the AL?
I mean, that's fair, but Mike Trout's won it 3 times on a pretty bad team. So, right, players on bad teams can win the award. And I think that there's also definitely an East Coast bias in there with Judge winning it.
So let's get to the offseason now. And we have a big trade for us locally. The Mariners have traded with the Blue Jays for Teoscar Hernandez. And going to the Mariners is Teoscar Hernandez, and going to the Blue Jays is pitcher Eric Swanson and pitching prospect Adam Macko. What are your thoughts, Colin?
There's a good trade. It's an expensive cost for the Mariners, but they'll get over it. Swanson, a very good relief pitcher this past year. Macko, top prospect. But the Mariners' big league team in this trade got better. And that's what matters most, right? If they want to give it a run this year, they needed to get better. They did that. It can't be done. They still have a lot of needs, but they got better. So that is a positive. Well, Anthony Rizzo signed a 2-year extension with the Yankees. Move on to week 11 of the NFL, because the Packers lost again to the Titans, Charlie.
You can quote me from last week. I was saying that they shouldn't be getting excited. I was right. I think it is official that we can declare that their season's over. One more
Yes.
loss, and I think objectively they're pretty much out of playoff contention. I think one
Correct.
more loss really seals that. The Titans are a good team. Packers are not. That's all I have to say.
All right. Well, the Commanders beat the Texans. Commanders are red hot right now. They're 6-5 after starting 1-4. So this is the question of who actually does have a chance in the loaded NFC East.
I think all the teams are playing pretty well. I think there is a scare that the Eagles could start slumping. They lost last week. They had a really close game against the Colts. That arguably, if you take away a couple of mistakes by the Colts offensive line at the very end of the game, that game has different results, and the Eagles are looking really not that great.
Yep.
The Giants had a pretty bad loss to the Lions this week, but I think they're still good. Cowboys had that huge win against Minnesota. They're trending up, and I think really depending if we look at the league, the NFC anyway, the entirety of the East is great. The West is okay, and the North and South are pretty terrible.
Correct.
So I think
like
Cowboys-
the North and South will both each only get one playoff team, and the West will get at most two. So the East is going to get is going to get 3 or 4 playoff teams.
I do believe that the 49ers are going to win the West, just looking at their team.
Yeah, so the question is whether the Seahawks can also sneak into the playoffs.
I think we're going to have a battle for the final wild card spot between the Commanders and the Seahawks.
Yeah, I mean the Seahawks, I think they are a better team than the Commanders, but it's close.
And I think I mean
also the Seahawks. I mean both teams had a bad start to the year, honestly.
And they both have quarterbacks that kind of came out of nowhere.
Yeah. So also the Falcons beat the Bears, which would not at all be relevant to anything except given how bad the rest of the NFC South is. So, Charlie, who can and cannot win that division?
So I think at this point it's really come down to the Falcons and the Bucks. Who the Buccaneers lead that division at 5-5. The Falcons are 5-6. And then if the rest in that division, you have the Saints who are 4-7 and the Panthers who are 3-8 and have yet to win a game that wasn't at home, much like the Warriors until recently. But I really don't think those bottom two teams can do anything. I think it'll be the Saints and the Bucks battling out for the rest of the season.
All right, you mentioned the Panthers. I want your thoughts on Baker Mayfield because as far as I can tell, he's just a bad quarterback, right? It seems like just a wasted number 1 draft pick. Do you agree?
I would agree.
All right. Patriots beat the Jets. So this is another division where 4 teams could win that division and 3 of them could possibly go to the playoffs. So who will win that division and who will go to the playoffs?
Sorry, which division is this?
The AFC East.
I don't know. Buffalo just hasn't looked good. I think they are going to win that division, but I think it's going to be close. I think the Dolphins could, if they continue their trend, stay ahead of the Bills. The Jets have a chance. I think they might make the playoffs, and I just don't know if the Patriots have it in them.
Yeah. But then there's also Zach Wilson, which is it time to move on though because he's looked bad. But also at the same time, he was only last year was he this number 2 overall draft pick. He's only in the second year, so he could just not be ready. So it might be too early to move on from him. So what are your thoughts on all of that?
I think they need to give him maybe another year to develop. They do have a first round pick this year, and I think they may want to use that if they can. But it is it's hard to tell. Zach Wilson could just continue to go backwards, which that is a possibility. But I do see him slowly starting to move forward.
Yeah. And I mean, also, I feel like he just took no responsibility for the loss this week. And that's not something that you want. We'll see. The Jets might not even start Zach Wilson at quarterback next week. I bet that the Broncos are also wishing that they could start someone else at quarterback next week after the Raiders beat them again. The Broncos would be 9-1 this season. if they could score 18 points in regulation every single game.
Yeah.
Instead, they have 3 wins. They're 3-7.
And
Thoughts?
yes, I do have a couple of thoughts on that, and that's Seattle may have just made one of the best trades of all time.
Yeah. No, I think it's time we start having that discussion.
Yeah, Wilson just hasn't looked good. The Broncos as a team, we thought they may have a couple problems with that new head coach coming in, but they've just been an absolute disaster.
And I don't think that their coach is good either.
No, I would agree with that. I mean, if we're looking at it right now, if the draft was to be today, it would be the 8th pick. That the
No, be the 5th pick.
Then the one I'm looking at is slightly out of date then.
Yeah, the 5th pick, which they would then have to hand over to Seattle.
I mean, that's just bad.
Yeah, it's really bad.
That pick was projected to be the 19th overall pick.
Yeah, and it looks like there's a good chance of it being top 5. And when I look at their schedule, the only game that I see the Broncos favored in for the rest of the season is against the Panthers next week, and I'm not even confident that they're going to win that. Right? You're looking at what might be a 3 or 4 win team.
It is very much possible. I don't think they're going to get the number 1 pick. I think that is going to be the Texans.
Yep.
But they could definitely be in the top 3, and they could draft a very high quality quarterback with that.
Yeah. Well, the Chiefs beat the Chargers, so there's a couple questions that would arise here. First is Patrick Mahomes for MVP again.
It is possible. It is certainly possible that that is what they end up going with. But I don't know. I think possibly him. Allen's had some bad interceptions, so I don't know. I still think it could be Geno Smith.
I'm not sure, but I'll say this, which is like, I feel like we've all gotten used to the greatness of Patrick Mahomes. But watch him play a game. It's beautiful, honestly. His passes are phenomenal. So the other question is, what happened to this division being competitive?
Well, as I said earlier, there was a couple of doubts about the how good the Raiders with Devontae Adams and the Broncos with Russell Wilson were going to be. But everyone thought the Chargers were going to be really good. They haven't been. And the Chiefs have just looked like the Chiefs.
Yeah. Completely fair. Some other scores from around the league: the Bills beat the Browns, the Eagles beat the Colts, Saints beat the Rams, the Lions beat the Giants, the Ravens beat the Panthers, the Cowboys beat the Vikings, and the Bengals beat the Steelers. Meanwhile, 49ers Cardinals taking place as we tape right now, so we do not have any final results on that.
Yeah, just real quick in that game. Currently, with 9 minutes left in the second quarter, the 49ers are up 7-3.
Yeah, not unsurprising to me whatsoever. Week 12 of college football has taken place. A lot of really good games, especially among teams that you wouldn't have expected to lose. But number 2, Ohio State barely held off Maryland. Number 3, Michigan barely held off Illinois. Number 4, TCU barely held off Baylor, while number 5, Tennessee was upset by South Carolina 63-38, Charlie.
So their playoff hopes are gone.
Their playoff hopes are completely gone. Number 7, USC, they might still have playoff hopes because they beat number 16, UCLA. And in a big game, Cal beat Stanford, mounting a huge fourth quarter comeback to win that game. So, Charlie, let's get a preview of the final week of the regular season in college football.
We have an absolutely huge game between Ohio State and Michigan. Both teams are 11-0. Both are undefeated, and that will determine the winner of the Big Ten East. And then we'll have huge playoff implications because whoever loses might get knocked out of the playoff conversation.
Yeah, I feel like it got more unlikely that would happen with Tennessee's loss, but it's still possible.
We have Oregon and Oregon State. Oregon gets to go to the Pac-12 championship with a win. And Kansas and Kansas State. Kansas State gets the Big 12 championship if they win. And Tulane and Cincinnati will decide who goes to the Cotton Bowl. Will likely decide who goes to the Cotton Bowl.
Yeah. Meanwhile, the World Cup has begun in Group A. Ecuador beat Qatar 2-0. Netherlands beat Senegal 2-0. Group B, the first games there, U.S. and Wales tied 1-1, while England beat Iran 6-2. Groups C through H, they'll play their first games later this week. And Charlie, before we go, the final Grand Prix of the season.
Yes. The Abu Dhabi Grand Prix was boring. Nothing much happened. Red Bull had a front row lockout. They essentially shot off the line. No one could catch Verstappen. He won. Hamilton, Alonso, and Latifi DNF'd. And that's really all I have to say. But in terms of interesting battles, for second in the championship, Perez and Leclerc came in tied on points. Leclerc got second, and so he will win second place. So the implications of that move between the two Red Bulls in Brazil last week has had huge championship implications, which could really sour the relationship between Verstappen and Perez going into the next season. But other than that, the only other interesting battle, I think, was Alpine and McLaren, and I believe, unless I missed something, that Alpine did win that battle to fourth, and Haas and AlphaTauri separated by 2 points. Neither team scored points, so Haas will get 8 points in the eighth in the championship, and AlphaTauri will get 9th.
All right, so what are our top 5?
Are in constructors or drivers?
Drivers.
I believe it's Verstappen, Leclerc, Perez, and then I think after that it's Sainz and Russell, but I can check for you.
All right. Yeah, so that is going to do it for this episode, so make sure that you subscribe. We have new episodes coming out every single Tuesday, wherever you listen to your podcasts. Visit our website, cctalks.net. Call us with your questions, 360-389-2630. Again, 360-389-2630. Also follow us on Twitter at CC Talks Podcast. For our production designer Zack, co-writer Drake, thanks for listening. I'm Colin.
And I'm Charlie. By the way, I flipped them. Russell was 4th, Sainz was 5th.
All right, see you next week.
See you next week.